Back on the Young Turks. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, of course, and we're going to talk to Richard Stengel now. He's the editor of Time magazine. He's also a bit of an expert, to say the least, on Nelson Mandela. He wrote his Mandela's autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, or helped him write in '93. He's co-producer in 1996 of the Oscar-nominated documentary Mandela, and he's got a new book out now, Mandela's Way, 15 Lessons on Life, Love, and Courage. With a preface from Nelson Mandela, which makes sense. Richard, welcome to the Young Turks.
Great to be on with you.
All right, great to have you here. Now, Nelson Mandela is, in my opinion, a living legend, and the one guy that I look up to most in the world. But not everybody shares my opinion. Lately, I don't know if you've noticed this, there's some right-wing revisionist history going around. I've heard Rush Limbaugh say it and some others saying, what are you talking about? Mandela's a terrorist. All right, so let's tackle that first. Let's get that out of the way. He was the leader of the military wing of the African National Congress. So tell me a little bit about that, and tell me why the right wing is wrong about that analysis.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting question, Cenk, because let's look at the history, right? I mean, if we go back, to the 40s and 50s, I mean, South Africa, the Nationalist Party came to power in 1948, and they had a racist philosophy called apartheid that had a different legal system for white and black, and yet that country was an ally of the U.S. and Great Britain and other Western countries. And so, Nelson Mandela was the leader of a revolutionary movement that wanted to topple that government, and he was considered a terrorist by the U.S. and by Great Britain, and certainly within South Africa. So, I mean, in that sense, that's true. Just the same way that that George Washington was considered a terrorist by Great Britain, and Thomas Jefferson and the great leaders of the Republic in the early days during the Revolutionary War.
So, that leads to a couple of other interesting questions. Does that mean that perhaps we should be a little bit more open to negotiation with anyone at this point? Because it's easy to say, all right, you know what, Hamas, they're terrorists. But maybe there's a Nelson Mandela floating around somewhere in there.
Well, look, everybody, as you point out, I mean, in a way, everybody is looking for a Nelson Mandela. I mean, I still see stories, who's the Nelson Mandela of Afghanistan, who's the Nelson Mandela of Iraq. And I mean, part of what I think makes sense about that is that he was also a person who was willing to see the good in others and to see the other side and to make find a rapprochement with his enemy. I mean, that was the lesson of Nelson Mandela when he came out of prison. But that man who went into prison, as you say, was the leader of the military wing of the ANC, the first kind of commander of the military wing of the ANC, and basically he said, and in our conversations, he would often say, he had one great goal, which was to make South Africa a non-racial democracy, one man, one person, one vote, and pretty much anything else anything that would get you there was a tactic, and so he looked at whether the ANC should be nonviolent or violent in a strategic way, not necessarily in a moral way, and I think for so much reconciliation to happen in the world today, people have to be practical. They can't be ideological.
See, then that leads us, I think, to the most interesting question. When did he judge that going the military route was not the best strategy and switch over to the diplomatic route, and why did he come to that decision?
Well, that really only happened, frankly, after he came out of prison. I mean, P.W. Botha, who was then the state president, probably 4 or 5 years before Mandela was ultimately released, made an offer to release him if he would unconditionally renounce violence and the military struggle, and he refused to do so. And so, there were opportunities to do that, but he felt that he could only do that from a position of strength and not weakness. And really that only happened, when there really was a kind of new constitution and a date set for a democratic election. And what he was afraid of was not the military wing of the ANC. He was afraid of a very, very extreme right wing, white Afrikaner military movement in South Africa that would cause a civil war.
So, how did he gain that position of power where then he could turn around and go, okay, let's not do anything military, let's go the nonviolent route?
That happened when he was not the leader of the ANC when he went into prison. And one of the things that happened during all those years in prison, apart from it teaching him self-discipline and self-control, which became the hallmark of his leadership, it also made him an icon around the world. And the Free Mandela movement started, 20 years or 10, 15 years before he was released. So when he came out of prison, he was the de facto leader of the ANC and the movement for democracy in South Africa, and he had to rise to the occasion. I mean, that was power was thrust upon him. He didn't actually necessarily seek it, and it gave him great power. And the fact that he used that power wisely and generously and sought, and told everybody, we need to forget the past and forgive our enemies, was the thing that brought, I think, harmony eventually to South Africa.
And I think certainly part of what made him a living legend in my mind. It's that he could have gone in another direction. I mean, it's one of those pivotal moments, kind of like when after the American Revolution they say to George Washington, "All right, great job. Now would you like to be king?" And he's
right.
like, "No, that's not the point of this whole thing."
No, in fact, I think that's a great analogy, because I think Washington is a comparable figure to compare Mandela to, because, as you say, lots of people wanted Washington to be king or president for life. There were no term limits in those days. He decided after his second term that he would retire, and in fact, Mandela, decided after his first term that he would retire. That really hadn't happened in African countries or democracies almost ever before. So just the way Washington said, every step I take in the sand is going to be seen and followed by somebody. That's the same thing as Nelson Mandela saw.
We're talking to Richard Stengel. He's the editor of Time magazine and wrote the new book Mandela's Way. One last question on that route, Richard, which is, I didn't mean to come to Hamas so often, but as we're having this conversation, you think, look, Mandela didn't renounce violence until he was in a position where he thought he could. I've always rejected Hamas's route towards violence, but when you look at the analogy, does it hold to say that, well, okay, I get strategically why they're not recognizing Israel for the moment being? Does that make sense?
Well, look, if we look at history, I mean, look at all of the revolutionary and even violent movements that then became politically accepted, from what happened in the Revolutionary War in this country to the IRA to the PLO. They were all once branded as terrorist institutions that you couldn't negotiate with or bargain with, and in the case of Hamas, I mean, I think even even the Obama government, I mean, there are people in the government who think that we need to talk to Hamas, that it's better to try to find something that we have in common with them than to ostracize them, and ostracizing them, may give them power. So, I mean, I think there's a historical precedent for all of this, and and it's not very far away either.
All right, now let's talk about the book, because this is not his autobiography. This is the 15 lessons on life, love, and courage, as you say in the title. And there's some very interesting lessons here. You have different chapters on lead from the front and lead from the back. How do you do both? What does that mean?
Well, he's a man of complexity. I mean, he can contain contradictions, and leading from the front is something that we all understand. That's standing up, jumping out of the trench, and saying, "Follow me." But leading from the back is in some ways more interesting. And I remember we used to take these very early morning walks. He's a very early riser, and we would meet at 5 a.m. to take a walk. And we were doing this once near where he grew up in the Transkei of South Africa, and he asked me, have you ever herded cattle? And I'm a city kid, and I had to answer no. And I asked him why, and he said, well, it's interesting lessons for leadership, because the way you herd cattle is you do it from the back, you do it from behind, you get them to go in the direction you want, not by leading from the front, but by finding some others to deputize as your leaders, to kind of to push and guide from the rear. And that is one of the things that he realized about leadership too, that you can't hog all the glory. You can't always be the person seen to be leading from the front. And I think that's one of the lessons that he learned in prison, and it's one of the things that I think helped him once he came out, because he empowered a lot of people to lead alongside of him.
Richard, there's chapter in your book, chapter 13, that Sarah Palin's going to love. It's Quitting is Leading To. How so? How should Sarah Palin be encouraged that sometimes quitting is also leading?
Well, because he would say that I think one of the weaknesses of so many leaders is that they can't change their mind, that it looks like weakness to change your opinion about something. And what I meant by that, and I think what he means by that is this idea that he says that when circumstances change, you change your mind. It's not a weakness to change your mind. It's actually a strength. And so I think what he means and what I mean by quitting is leading to is that in fact sometimes you have to say, you know what, I've gone down the wrong path, or I can't achieve this end. I have to try something different.
Dave, are you listening to this? Okay. Our executive producer, Dave, always gives me grief for changing my mind. I used to be a Republican. Now I'm certainly not. And because things change, context matters. And what I get out of the book a lot is the balance matters, too. Because there's also a chapter called Have a Core Principle. So tell me a little bit about that, and when do you stick to the core principle, and when do you say, all right, look, we got to make compromise here, or I was wrong about something?
Right. I mean, in his case, the core principle was achieving a democratic South Africa with one person, one vote, and, allowing majority rule, which had never existed there before. I think that was his core principle. Everything else was a tactic or a strategy. And so I think he would say that, no, I'm not going to renounce that core principle, but basically almost anything else was something that you could compromise about, or something that you could see the other side. And that, I think, was one of his great strengths, is that he wasn't ideological. He was very pragmatic, and he would find a way to get to that ultimate end that some people might regard as compromising or giving up.
I often question myself on how I'm seeing Obama as his presidency unfolds, and I think he makes too many compromises. But then, I saw, and it's goofy, but I saw Invictus about, of course, that's about Nelson Mandela and the rugby team. And I hear you talking, and I read the book, and it seems like, God, Mandela did so many compromises, and I wonder if I'm seeing Obama wrong, or in that sense that would I be surprised? Would I be shocked at how many compromises Mandela did, as long as he kept to that one core principle?
I think you might be, and there were certainly people within the ANC and within his movement that thought he had capitulated, that he had given in, that he was compromising with the enemy, and that happened, different times in his career, and it happened while he was in prison when he secretly started negotiations with the government. I mean, there were people who thought that he was a traitor to their movement, and he would say, and I think he was proved right, that this was the right thing to do, and that we can't overthrow the government with armed struggle. We always have to have a discussion. We always have to have a negotiation. So why not start now? And another one of his lessons is play the long game. Is that you have to, particularly in politics. I mean, you have to try to look over the horizon. And I don't know. You might say about the health care bill that maybe Obama didn't handle it perfectly in every way, but he was sort of playing a long game, and he ultimately got pretty much to the place that he wanted. I mean, that would be the Mandela way of looking at it.
Right. And I don't want to, Obama's overhyped enough, and I don't want to compare him too much to Mandela. But there is one other final chapter here that I want to talk about that, again, reminds me of Obama. Keep your rivals close. As I'm reading that, I'm thinking Hillary Clinton at the State Department. But tell us what that means and the difference between friends, enemies, and rivals.
It's a good question. I mean, he would say, I mean, of course, there's that line from The Godfather, right? Keep your friends close, but your enemies even closer, and that's just a very pragmatic thing of watch closely so you don't get stabbed in the back. But I think he would say that, and he certainly has that practical side of it. But in his first government, I mean, he brought all of his rivals in, from F.W. de Klerk to Gotcha Buthelezi, and basically it's the idea that you can probably find something that you can both compromise on, that you can find something that unites you more than divides you, and that gets you closer to your end goal than ostracizing the person. And I think also he realized that it makes you look bigger, like if you have a big tent, and it makes you look more generous. And he was always concerned with how things appeared and how his leadership appeared, and I think that factored in also.
All right, we're talking to Richard Stengel. He's the editor of Time magazine, and the book is Mandela's Way. Richard, before we let you go, I wanted to ask you a couple of quick questions on Time magazine, too, since we have you on the show.
Sure.
I was just at the Guardian Changing Media Summit. There was a lot of talk about the state of the industry. Michael Wolff did a little speech where he said all the newspapers are going to be gone in 12 months. That might be a bit much, but I don't think he's that far off. How much trouble are magazines in as opposed to the newspapers? Are they in better shape, and how does that reflect on Time?
Well, we're in pretty good shape, and I think magazines in general are certainly in better shape than newspapers. I mean, it's funny, there's probably, it's an inverse ratio. The more often you publish, the worse shape you're in, because if you're publishing every day like newspapers, then you're really competing with the web, and so it's hard to justify that print product. But I guess, and Michael is a friend of mine and an incredibly smart guy. I think what he meant is that there are plenty of newspapers that will go away in their physical print form, but where do we go online on the web to get our news and information? From newspapers, from magazines, from news sites, and the desire for news and information, I think, is higher now than almost any time ever. And traditionally newspapers and magazines are the most reputable and trustworthy places to go. I mean, that's one of the things that keeps Time so strong, is that people trust us to separate the wheat from the chaff, to convert information into knowledge, and I think there's always going to be a place for that. And I think too that all of these different forms, even the physical forms of publications, will still exist. I mean, the scales will change. The Apple iPad is coming out next week. I think that will start to change the industry too. But I think all the different forms will continue to exist simultaneously. The relative scales and the ratio may change, but physical newspapers and physical magazines and physical publications are not going away.
Do you sense there's going to be a shift over to charge? Like, I don't know why they don't do this. It seems like the right model. Why don't they charge per article instead of saying, "Hey, you got to subscribe to Time magazine and pay X amount of money per month or whatever"? If you see an article online, charge a nickel for it, whatever it is, to read it. Is that happening at all in the industry?
Well, a lot of people are talking about it, and there are some places that do it. I mean, for a long time, the technology, that was kind of a difficult technology. People called it the microcharges, and how do you charge somebody 5 cents for an article, and they have to register and all of that. But I think people are gradually getting used to that, and you're looking at a lot of big media companies, like News Corp, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, and the New York Times Company, and Time Inc., my corporate parent, talking about charging for content. And I think that's something you'll also see in 12 months, is that you'll see a lot less free journalism on the web in 12 months than you do right now.
All right. Richard Stengel, editor of Time magazine, and the book is Mandela's Way, 15 Lessons on Life, Love, and Courage. Very interesting read. I love Nelson Mandela, so I found it very, very interesting, but I think all of you will too. Thank you so much for joining us, Richard. We really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, Cenk.
All right. We'll be right back.